Hey, Tom.
Hey, Eric, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing all right.
I just realized, hold on, I need to turn my. Haven't been in here in a while, and all right. No.
Looks like you had a pretty good trip out west.
Yeah. It was a mixed bag. I ended up obviously saw a lot of great stuff, but ended up having to leave Yellowstone early because there was a storm that was moving in. It was predicted to sit over top of Yellowstone for the entirety of my trip there. And it started getting really misty and gray and ugly, and then it was turning to snow. And then it did end up shutting. I left on Saturday evening, and somebody I'd met in the park told me that they shut down the entrances on the north side the next day because there were 8 to 10 inches of snow and it was blizzard conditions. And I was like, well, all right. So I went on to Theodore Roosevelt and did some stuff that way.
Yeah.
But you guys had a good week out there after I left. I saw the pics of the storms and the.
Yeah, you mean in South Dakota?
Yeah, in South Dakota.
Yeah, we did.
There was a guy I met him in Theodore Roosevelt, and I think he'd either overlapped you or came just after you. And he's standing there, he's asking me, because we crossed paths in the evening for a shot, and he was telling me he'd just come up from, down there in the Badlands. He goes, oh man, he's like, you wouldn't believe one night we had last week. He said, we're standing there, we're photographing this beautiful sunset, and then a storm moves in and there's lightning bolts and rainbows. And then it cleared out and we were photographing the Milky Way. And then all of a sudden the Northern Lights started up, and it was like, you had like everything all in one.
Yeah, wow.
All in one bout, man. You got like the trifecta, or well, more than trifecta that way, but
yeah. You must have been out there all night then if you saw the Milky Way and the Northern, because it was like we were out there till almost midnight and the Milky Way was still barely above the horizon. So he must have been.
He was the type of guy that he seemed like he was going to stay, because he was like, I think I'm going to hang around all night here and see if it shows up. Yeah. And it was kind of like, dude, the clouds are already moving in gray. It's socking us in now. It's like, so, I wasn't even going to attempt it. So, plus I had to make my way up onto some mountaintop in the middle of nowhere, on some single track edgy trail that to park on some mountain road. So
yeah. That's North Dakota, isn't it?
Yeah, that's North Dakota. At least that edge, and then the rest of it was flat. And then it was storm. It followed me all the way across and was sparking tornadoes through Minnesota. And I was sitting in Fargo because I'd planned to stop for the night in Fargo, and my truck was just like rocking at like 20 degrees maybe, just from the wind.
Oh,
And I'm
yeah.
like, I am not sitting in this. So I took off and tried to split the storm, and either just missed before or after a tornado that shot across my path. So
Yeah, that was some crazy weather.
hi, Michelle.
Hi,
How are you? Did I pronounce that right, Michelle?
yes,
Okay. And then Bruce, welcome. So I know Bruce and I have chatted back and forth a little online, but don't think we've ever met. Turn this light on. Always turns my face red for some reason.
Yeah, it did.
I forget it. Trying to figure out I haven't worked out of my office for a while. And my speakers are working very weirdly. All right. Anybody hear me?
Yep. I can hear you just fine.
Okay, so it was coming through that. I just couldn't hear you. Forget it.
Let me make sure I'm.
And give it a few minutes and see who all shows up. And so how long, I know Tom's been shooting a long time. How long have you guys been shooting?
a long time.
A long time. So I know Bruce is on the Greater Dayton photography page. Are you on that as well, Michelle, or did you find out another way?
I found out from Bob Wilcox.
Oh, about tonight?
Mhm.
I don't know who that is.
You know, I've never met him, but we've crossed paths and he's just given me an enormous amount of help. So
Okay.
he's always telling me little places to go and look for solutions. I've shot for 30 plus years, and you know, every couple months you learn something completely new that you never knew before.
Okay.
Yeah, I've known Bob for years. He's a great guy.
He's an amazing man. He's just amazing.
I don't think my path is crossed with him. I'll have to meet him. He's not the I forget the old guy's name that we were hanging out with out there in Missouri, Tom.
No, that was what was his name? Yeah, no, Bob lives in Kentucky.
Okay. Hey, Ryan, welcome.
Hey, how's it going, Eric?
Good. How are you doing tonight?
Good, good.
Oh, man. So anybody been shooting anything interesting?
Fireworks.
Fireworks?
Same
I would-
here.
I'd say those were not interesting around our area lately. Dayton had a really bad showing. So from
Went
what
to
I
a
heard.
new place this year, a place I'm familiar with, but I never knew they did amazing fireworks, and I had just stopped clicking. They stood with my jaw dropped.
Yeah,
Just fabulous.
I like shooting down when it comes to fireworks. I like shooting down in Cincinnati because you're right there on the water. When at every Friday home game, the Reds have a fireworks show. So you've got the water, you've got the city line.
Yeah,
Because most of the time when people shoot fireworks, it's just lines on a screen that doesn't usually, at least for me, it doesn't do anything for me other than seeing colored lines on a screen.
right. This was on the water, and there was actually a small carnival going on to the
Oh, that's cool.
right of them. So there was a couple of Ferris wheels and water and a bridge but the fireworks were just incredible.
Now, where are you located? Cincinnati?
I know I'm in Michigan.
Michigan. Okay.
Yeah, I live in West Michigan, but we went east to Bay City.
Okay.
And I think somebody told me there that they're in the top 5 fireworks in the United States.
I spent some time in Western Michigan back in January or February. I forget which one.
Oh, the cold weather.
Yeah. It was the best time to be there.
It is.
Except for the one day I was there, it was snowing. It was a rainy snow. It was blowing at like 30 miles an hour off the lake, and
Yep.
I couldn't feel my face for like 3 or 4 hours afterwards, but got some decent stuff. So
Were you in the lower peninsula or the upper?
yeah, lower. I did mostly that kind of area down here by
Okay, so
Michigan City.
east.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I didn't make it up as far as Holland. So I was just below Holland and down.
Okay.
Oh.
So I'm about 30 miles north of Holland
Okay.
on Lake Michigan, and it's pretty lovely. But the UP is
Yeah, I'm looking at I was planning a possible trip up that way. I saw that they have moose up there
yes.
in one little section. And so I thought about maybe trying to make a run up there and during the rut season and see if anything was up that way. So, but yeah.
Fabulous waterfalls. If you go in the winter, they have ice caves.
Wow.
It's pretty fun, but it
Yeah.
can be 10 below.
Yeah. I sleep in my truck and that ends up being perfect weather for that. I love it. So once it gets above like 30 degrees, I'm like, nah, this is too hot. I'm done. So, but hi, Kathy, how are you?
Good.
Been a while. How you been doing?
Okay. Finally coming back alive after my surgery, and then, of course, I'm supposed to be off this summer, so taking it easy.
Did you go back? You went back to work, right?
I'm teaching at Sinclair now.
Oh, okay. Very cool.
Quote unquote as a full-time teacher, so
Okay.
yeah.
What are you teaching down there?
I teach in industrial engineering.
Okay. Very cool.
So hopefully I can make it. I can't sit in one spot for a long time. So if I just drop off, it's not because I think you're doing a bad job. It's just that I may not be able to, so.
Or it's because I'm doing a bad job. Either way,
Well, it could be,
it
You
saves you
never
from
know.
having to worry about all that. Yeah. Oh goodness. You might suck. You might not. Either way, you won't know.
Well, I think it's always neat to see how people do stuff.
Yeah.
Two people could get to the same spot, but do it differently.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. to see
Well,
how
it's like
people-
once you start working with like Photoshop, then you realize there are like 100 ways to get to the same place.
Yes.
And like I only use like I've got a few things tonight I thought I would show that where I do use Photoshop. But most of my stuff is done in Lightroom. And I know there are others that edit exclusively in Photoshop. And so, but I know we had a few more I thought were coming. Let's see.
I know one thing when I got on, I had a hard time figuring out how to join. The little join buttons over there way on the right, and it just not.
Oh,
I do that
yeah,
all the
yeah.
time when I'm doing something through Facebook, I run that problem all the time. I would keep looking and looking because I keep looking for that Zoom link, and that Zoom link wasn't there. But you have to hit the join button, but it's kind of inconspicuous.
Yeah, I do that with my schedule hasn't lined up, but I always did, I used to go to Tom's thing all the time.
Yep.
And I mean, as many times I've been there, I'd be like, how do I get into this meeting? And it's like, oh wait, join event.
Well, it's funny, I probably had a much more difficult time if you hadn't, Stan made some comment about it after last week, and it's like, oh, that's right, you gotta go hit the join button. So I probably would have had a more difficult time tonight. But I'm like, oh yeah, I gotta look for the join button.
Well, I think I've even messaged you a couple times in the middle of it going, hey, where's the, oh, never mind, there's the button. But
Yeah, we're stealing your topic for tomorrow, though.
are you?
What the post, so. So I said we were stealing your topic when I posted it, so.
I think I saw it come up, but I didn't get a chance to. It's all that Tom posted in thing, and then
Yeah, well, it didn't say Tom is stealing your topic.
no, this was just oh yeah, that was spurred. That whole thought process was spurred because I did that workshop with Steve Mathis, and in the morning we had great shooting conditions, and then in the evening the conditions were less favorable, and just we weren't finding anything. So he did a portfolio review, and my website was severely lacking in being up to date, and so he went off of my Instagram, and it was not a pleasant experience.
Some tough love.
It was necessary, but not pleasant. So it was one of those where he went through and just, he's like, the only reason why I'm being this blunt is because you seem like you want it, and you said you could. I'm like, I did. And then after I got out of the car and back at camp, I felt like I probably should just pack up my equipment and call it quits, and took a couple of days and processed everything and went, yeah, he's right. And started working through all that meant for the next week and a half. So, but
Yeah, I thought it was a good, should be a good discussion.
yeah, I mean, he and I think I've watched enough of his videos, because he even said, he's like, my best work, I don't just post my best work, but he's like, there is a level, and if people look at it and go, why, it's like, yeah, so, but then some people are very focused. I know Jeremy last year was passed over for being included in a magazine article because his Instagram is schizophrenic with his photographic interests. He shoots wildlife, he shoots macro, he shoots film, and they looked at it and went, yeah, this is all over the place, where we don't want to include you. We'll include somebody else who's more focused on exactly what the title of this article is, despite the high quality of the work that they liked from him. So it was like, lovely. I'm trying to see. All right.
What was the name of the project that they eliminated him for being schizophrenic?
I forget. I think because they found him by way of his blog and something else. And if I think, I definitely know it had to do with his film work, and I think it might have also been to do with his Holga, or maybe it was one of the other cameras. But because his work was not on Instagram, was not exclusively film based, and they were a film oriented magazine, they he's pretty sure that's why they passed him over, because they were gung ho about all of his stuff, liked his website, were raving about his work and that particular usage of whatever he did. And then they're like, can you send us your Instagram so we can take a look at that and evaluate it? And he did. And they said, we're not going to use you in the article after that. So that was kind of his, but at the same time, it's like, who wants to put that much effort into some of these things like that? So, but
Well, my experience with editors hasn't been very good either, so.
yeah. And I used to be an editor, and I know that they're a writing editor, not a photo editor, but and I had to tell people that we were buying their stuff, but we were completely rewriting it because the idea was good, but the their process was not good. And they always obviously got offended by that. So it's always hard being on the editorial side of things, but all right. Well, I think with letting Rodney in, we'll wait till he gets connected, and then we'll get started. So before I hit I'm gonna record tonight. Oh no, I am recording. I'm already recording. So, but just a reminder that the camera sees you. If you decide to go take a dump or something, don't carry the camera on with you. I had a friend in one of these one time that picked his nose for half an hour because he didn't realize his camera was picking him up. Stuff like that. But at the same time, leave your camera on if you don't mind. That gives me faces to look at. And feel free to ask questions and stuff. And some of this will be kind of redundant for some of you. Others of it, this will be, nothing. So what I wanted to do is, as we've been at the done the Greater Dayton photography page, we've had people that they could have been doing photography for a long time, or they might be new to it, and part of the thing that we notice is that sometimes people will post work, and then down the road will post something came from the same shots but was far better. And so some of it has to do with editing issues, some of it has to do with shot selection, but it was also just some of the stuff that I had to wrestle with like I was telling Tom earlier with Steve, when he went through, some of my issue was shot selection, and pushing to always look for the best and to not put out subpar stuff or just okay. Because you can get into the habit of putting in work that was the best of the day, but you probably shouldn't post anything if that was the best of the day, because it was just not good. And then I also know that, like when I was starting off, it would have been nice to have seen somebody's process from beginning to end, how they work through everything, get from the camera to everything else. And so I just thought I'd start from the top of my process, and I'll back up a little bit into the shooting as I talk through some of the things that when we go through the shots and stuff like that. Let me pull that back up. That should not have gone down. One of the first things that I do when I get home from a shoot of any kind is I eject the card, I bring it to my computer, and I put a folder on my desktop. That's where I start. And I label it by year and then month and day, and then the camera that I used. this shot that I'm using now was done on June 30th. So it would be 2022 06 30. That way it comes up by nearest year first in any list that I put. Anytime you put it by month and day and year, then it starts coming up by that month, and they're all grouped together. And so then you have to separate the years. And I prefer to have the years be the way that it starts off by separating it and then month and day. And then I keep each of the cameras separate that I use, just a organizational thing. And then what I'll also do, whether before I import it to Lightroom or after I import it to Lightroom, usually after, because these things will build up on my desktop before I ever move them. I have an 8 terabyte hard drive that's a backup. And so I will drop those on there by camera. I have multiple 8 terabyte external hard drives that I use as backup to just back up and double back up and make sure that things don't get lost. And
Eric,
yeah,
so when you keep track of your photos by camera,
yes.
have you renamed the file format in the camera, or do you do it on your computer? You just create a separate folder for your different cameras?
I create a separate folder for each of the cameras, because when I bring it in, let me see if I can, here, I'll share my screen and I'll show you, let me pull this, where are we at? Come here. Oh, that's why that won't do that. I'll show you my desktop right now. Let me, so can you guys see the file folders?
No, we're seeing a woodpecker.
Oh, off to the side, you're not over
Oh,
here?
Yeah, I gotta move. There we go.
Okay.
Yeah.
So off to the right, you'll see that they're each named 2022 06 29. That's a D500. Because I shoot with Nikons, that's about the most of what I'll do. I've got the D500, the D850, the D800, and the D3300, but I rarely use the 800 or the 3300. And so it's mostly the 500 or the 850. If I use one of the film cameras, then I'll do the same date, and then I'll put either Mamiya or Bronica or Hasselblad or Pentax or whatever it was that I used for that particular day. And then when I'm ready, I will transport these over to an external hard drive to store as backup. That makes sense so far? All right. Let me pull this stuff back over.
You're waiting until you get it on your external hard drive before you import it into Lightroom, right?
No, well, sometimes, but usually not. Usually my laptop is with me. So I'm putting these on here and then I'm importing them. I will often wait until I get home to do the import or until I have a lot of time, because I work off of external hard drives for all of it. It's just, there's just too many files. I'm working off of a separate catalog for this thing tonight, but my main catalog has like 110,000 photos in it. Because while it's one of those do as I say, not as I do with the clear out sort of things, I'm really bad with, I'll go through and figure out which ones I want to edit and then forget to remove the ones that I'm never going to touch ever again. And so they build up and I'll spend an hour here or there going through and sorting and removing stuff. But I still have like 110,000 in my working folder. Probably double that on the hard drives though, because I have actually removed stuff. And then when I import it, So when I import it to Lightroom, I have an external portable hard drive. That this one's a 5 terabyte drive. It's one of the rugged ones with the rubberized coating on it. That I carry around with me. Let me let Diane in. That I carry around with me all the time. So this one is the one that if I have something that's been removed, it's from this one. But my main hard drive does not have any of my photos ever removed. I'm a pack rat when it comes to that stuff. Digital storage is cheap and there's no need to get rid of it, even if it's a bad shot. Plus, it reminds me I can go back and look and go, yeah, I was a shitty photographer then. And I've gotten way better. But this is the working hard drive that I always have with me. But when I'm out and away, so I spent 2 weeks out in the Tetons, Yellowstone, that area. And basically what I would do is every time I would come back, I would deposit all the files onto my computer desktop. And then in the evenings, when I had a little more time, if I wanted to, then I would start importing them into Lightroom. Normally I was falling asleep during that process because it'd been a long day, but some days I got it done. But that way I had it saved there definitely, and then eventually got it over to here. So it was double saved on 2 hard drives because I'd have to take and reformat my card every time I went out. So just to make sure I had enough space on all my cards because there's just so much stuff to shoot. So
Do you put your raw files on your desktop?
yeah, that's what's in these in those folders. Those are just straight off my camera. I drop those into those folders and then I import them into Lightroom from there.
Sorry.
right.
Stop barking. No. Snacks.
Eric, when you edit those, they're on your hard drive?
Yes. Which hard drive? On my computer, on my working, or on my backup?
On your working hard drive.
Okay.
You put them on your desktop,
Barking
Yes.
girls.
put them into Lightroom,
Yes.
and when do you then process them and upon import?
Yeah. So, well, I mean, it depends. So, when they come in,
My issue is with Lightroom needs to identify the path. When Lightroom opens those up, it's not going to be on your desktop anymore.
well, it could be, but I don't have it. I have it put it onto here.
Okay, but when you put it onto there, how does Lightroom identify, how does Lightroom find your external hard drive if you imported them from your desktop? That makes sense?
Well, so let me share my, I'll share, hold on, I did that wrong. There we go. Okay. All right, can everybody see my, my Lightroom?
I'm good.
All good? Okay. So when I import, if you look down here, I'll hit the import button. I have it set up so that you select the source over here on the left. These are all the files that are currently on my desktop. If you remember from what you saw, there was the 2930, there's the 850 on 30, 7.1, 7.3, 7.4, graduation that I shot. And so then when I choose, and I'm not going to choose it this time. And so this one's different because this is my working one or my workshop one. So everything in the workshop is, say, the catalog reads it from my laptop because I wanted it to be faster and just wanted to be easier. But over here on the right, you can see this one says up here in the upper right that it's moving it to the Macintosh hard drive. Well, on my other one, I can choose that and say that I want it saved in another place. And so on my working one, it has the LaCie as up here in the right, and then it does everything else the same. It divides it by date, puts it on the LaCie, because see, I can put it right here and tell it to go here, and that changes it to the LaCie, and we'll import it there.
So it's moving it to your external hard drive as
This
you're
is-
importing it.
And I'm what?
While you're importing it,
Yes,
it's also transferring them to your Macintosh external.
right up here in the
Okay.
top,
Okay,
says-
yeah,
you can see copy as DNG, copy, move, add.
right.
I just have it copy, so it leaves the desktop and then moves it over onto my hard drive and keeps the copy on my desktop. If I had it move, then it would remove it from my desktop, put everything on my external working hard drive.
Right, I follow you.
So that's my process, because I've got so many that it works faster off of the if I use my laptop and I use the hard drive, but there's no way I can. Purchasing memory for a laptop is way more expensive than purchasing memory as an external. It slows it down, but you're just making a choice there with what you're choosing for. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand.
Now, when I bring them in, when I import them, I also have them create. If you look right up here in the upper right by the histogram, see how this says original plus smart view? When I import them, I have it create a smart preview. So if I don't have my external hard drive plugged in, I can still do 90% of editing with it. Because it's a smart preview, and Lightroom is a non-destructive photo editing process, which means it adds it adds the editing on top of the base image, but doesn't change the base image. The only time it changes the base image is if I take it out of Lightroom and take it into like my Topaz Denoise or Sharpen or into Photoshop to do something with it. That's when it definitely has to have the original file. And I can even export without it being connected to the main drive, to the main original file, up to a certain point. So anything I want to export for Facebook or Instagram or anything like that, I don't need to be connected to the original photo for it to see it and be able to export it.
That's if you have smart preview selected.
That's if you have a smart preview. And you can even, so like you can select, like say you don't have them done, you can select and go up here into library, preview, and build smart previews. So if you've never created a smart preview, you can copy you can do the, in the Mac, it's Command A, but I think it's Control A and hit, and that'll highlight everyone. You can tell it that you want to build smart previews, and then that means that you can edit without being connected to the original file. If you're connected to the original file, then you probably don't need smart previews, but smart previews are stored along with the catalog on my computer, while all the original files are saved on the external hard drive. That makes sense so far?
Yep.
All right. There we go. All right. So on the import, it really depends on how much effort you want to put in up front. I'm not very good with a lot of upfront effort because I get excited about the shoot. I come back, I want to start editing, or I've got a shot that I saw on the camera, I want to check it, and I end up getting started. But a good thing to get started with is using tags, the keyword tags over here on the right. If you bring them in, sometimes, because like I got this entire 1,500 photos, I got this from the same location. So I could go in there and I could name that and tag that as being from that location, just as a start. The other part of the organization is being able to use Shift and X, and I use my arrow key. So you can't see what I'm doing, but what it'll do is if I hit Shift and X, now it's automatically moved to the other one. If you look down in the lower left, you'll see that it graded out the one that I was just on. And if I pull that one up, you'll see that right here, it's marked it with a black X. That means it's a rejected photo. And so what that means is that I can go through, if I do it this way, you can see it better. So X, 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 X. These I won't use. I don't like the fact that the bird is on the box. And some of them I want to have a bigger view, so I will pull it up and go, I'm going to reject this one because I don't want to use the back of a bird's head. It's just not it's not an engaging image. They've got the back. I can kind of see the eye, but he's still turned. This one I would probably hold on to, so I would Shift P, or I would just simply use my right cursor key and go past it. This is another one I would reject. It's got some movement, but again, it's kind of like wildlife photography is a lot like portrait photography, I think, in that the eye is really important for the most part. It's a good general rule to understand what it is that you're looking for. If it doesn't have the eye visible or some type of expression or some type of movement, it better be a very compelling image to keep it. So like these back here, probably while I'll keep them for a moment, I won't do anything with those because it's just a bird on a stick. If that's the only shot that I got that was worth doing anything with, then maybe, because it's a decently good shot of a bird on a stick. But overall, and then I'd look and kind of see that he doesn't have an insect or anything like that. It's just it's okay. It's not, there's nothing spectacular about this shot. And so when I've got all of these, let's say I've got all these grayed out, the real easy way is I hit the attribute and I tell it I want it to select everything that has a black flag, a rejected flag right here. So these are only the ones, you can see this upper left of every image has that black one. I'll select them all and I will just hit delete and I will delete from the disk. So now when I go back over here, all those earlier shots are gone. They're deleted off of the working file, not off of my desktop, not off of my backup, but off of my working file. Make sense so far? What was that? Okay.
I'm with you.
Okay.
Yeah, Eric, I'm with you. I know that some people will use the star ratings and the colors to kind of filter out. I've never found a use for that. I use the pick and the reject. Have you ever used the colors or the star ratings?
I don't use, okay, so I don't use for this process, I don't use the stars or anything because it's just really easy to pick or reject the individual images. Now, once I have worked through a series of images, I will decide on a star rating, this is something I've picked up recently. If I feel that this is portfolio worthy for me at the time, I'll give it 5. That makes finding it really easy. If it's an okay shot, I'll give it something less. And then like 4 stars, just something to differentiate so that I can easily use my attributes and say, okay, if it has a 5-star rating, then I'll be able to do that. So I am not sure how to let somebody in. Give me a second. Let me stop sharing this so I can see the other screen. There we go. Now I'll go back to sharing my screen. Okay. Okay. All right. Can we see the Lightroom thing again?
Yep.
All right. So, the next step for me is usually deciding how do I want to edit this photo for? What is my purpose in doing this? Is this for an artistic purpose? In that case, I feel pretty free to do almost anything I want. If it's for some sort of submission for something, then it will depend on what I'm submitting to. For instance, most wildlife photography submissions, they want proof of the original image because they want it to be as close to the raw file as possible. They don't want you to add, remove, or manipulate any of the individual pieces. So don't remove branches, stuff like that. Minimal cropping. Basically, they just want you to adjust exposure, contrast, vibrancy, the few basic sorts of things. They'll also ding you for over sharpening. A lot of stuff will go back to what's happening in the field. They will get, if you post, so I can almost guarantee that if you post an image of bird chicks in a nest, eggs in a nest on our page, that either I or Jeremy will say something, because typically it's unethical to get close enough to take them out of a nest. We all know that there are ways around and that are not unethical. I mean, you get a long lens, you get up, you get over, you're staying, 15 yards away from the nest, you get a shot in. That's very different from a lot of the cell phone images of people holding their phone, 6 inches from a nest to get pictures of a little baby bird. That's unethical in most wildlife settings and the way they handle it. Baiting and feeding wildlife. I know that's a gray area for a lot of Ohio photographers who photograph birds in their backyard. They'll set up stuff. Baiting with live mice or something to bring in owls and stuff is really frowned upon and even rejected. And recently, a couple years ago, you may not know the name David Yarrow, but I'm sure you've probably seen some of his work if you go look him up. But a couple of years ago, he was dinged in Yellowstone. Of course, he got off fairly light because he's a world, renowned photographer who just can do whatever he wants for the most part. But he and his crew were feeding foxes to try to get them closer so that he could take great shots of them. And he got great shots of them. He also ended up getting those foxes killed because they became nuisance foxes and started coming around humans and trying to eat their food and all that stuff. And they became a nuisance and had to be removed. So most of the time I'm editing for something in between. I used to be more in it needs to be as it is in camera, and I still try to get it as good in camera as possible. But I also understand the reality that sometimes that doesn't happen. But I'm also wanting to be honest about it. I'm not gonna say, oh, I snapped this shot if I've, replaced skies and stuff like that. And I don't do that because no matter how good you are, it usually looks really crappy. Even with the best of Luminar has done a really good job of starting to replace skies. Photoshop now has, you know, a thing that does it fairly easily, but you can still tell. It was funny. I had one on my Instagram, and in the description I had said I replaced the sky. Steve Mathis was flipping through. He goes, "You replaced the sky and put that on your Instagram? Come on!" And went on through. He's like, anybody who knows anything about photography can tell that. I thought it was a fairly decent for me having done it. It was not fairly decent. So just remembering that the less you do, especially with wildlife and nature stuff, the better. Some people are very good at the manipulation of an image. I am not all that great. I do a little bit, and I'm actually going to do one, a couple of things tonight just to show you some of the tools that can be done with it. And so when I'm going through and sorting through images, I'm looking for a couple of different things. I want, actually, let me start with how this starts in the field. Because the reality of it is if you want a good photo, if you want a good image, start by making a good image. I have a friend who told me I was probably I'd said the meanest thing ever to somebody, because they said, "How could I improve this image?" And I said, "You can go take a better image in the first place." I did not mean to be that rude. She told me that was very rude, and I'll still have to take her word for it, because it was a very bad image to begin with. And they were trying to turn a shot that they had taken at noon into something with a moon and night sky in it and dark. It's like, go take that image, just put in a little extra work and go take that. And so this series of images that I have here that I'm working on today with you guys, the sun was behind me. The bluebird nest box was about 25 yards in front of me. Beyond that was another maybe 30 to 50 yards to the trees. So what I knew I had was I could get a good clear shot of the bird on their perch, and it would cream out this background in bokeh. And I had to move and move and move a bit, because you can kind of see this black creeping in here on the right. There were gaps and openings and other things. So I had to work until I found the background on that branch that I wanted. What I've started doing with birds that are predictable on perches like this is I will mount my D500, and I have a Tamron 150 to 600 lens. I'll crop it the way I want it in the viewfinder. I'll get I'll get it set up to where it's in focus on the branch about where I want the bird to land and think it will land. And then I use a trigger, and I stop looking through the viewfinder, because my peripheral away from the viewfinder is way better than me holding it down. All of a sudden there's the bird, because my primary purpose is I want to do sequences like this. I want to get the bird in action. A bird sitting on a stick, I can get, 100 times over. I don't need to be able to do anything for that. And that's not a very exciting shot. And so like in this series, I would keep that one just because this one would be rejected. And this one would be one that I would definitely work on. And as a matter of fact, this is one that I am going to work on, because what you see here is the bird is facing towards us. It's got the catch light right there in the eye. That's an important part when doing wildlife, and you're looking for the eyeball. As a matter of fact, these, I waited until they turned so that I could hit, even while it's just a bird sitting on a stick. I waited until I got that catch light. Sometimes you miss it, but so you can see up here in the upper right, I was working with 1/1000th of a second, an F9 because I wanted some greater depth of field for the. I started by focusing on the stick, or on the landing perch, and I wanted to give it some depth as it flew in, so that I had a little bit of depth of focus to play with. Actually, let's go back here. So here's what it originally starts off with. I don't want it going away from me. I want a nice clean background. All of those sorts of things start in the field. The light behind me, knowing where these guys are going to land, and that's where I set up. So when it comes to actually working with the image, I have yet to find a way. I've looked and looked and looked, but one of the things that Lightroom wants to do when it imports is it wants to auto sharpen stuff. I remove that. I don't want it to, because when it sharpens an image, it sharpens everything. I'll go back through and maybe do some sharpening, but you can see when you pull this up, you see the noise in the image here, in the green especially, you can see that squiggly. Noise reduction will start to help get rid of that. But it also then starts to smooth out the wings. So you've got to find a balance between removing the noise, and I'm only working with an ISO of 720, so I'm not super high ISO either. So there's always going to be some noise, but I want to make sure that I'm not sharpening noise. And there'll be this masking button here that we'll talk about in a bit when we do some sharpening. Personally, I always start with an auto by hitting the auto button. That's in general, like 90% of the time I hit the auto button to see what it will do. To me, this becomes a little bright. For somebody else, they might like this. So I would probably pull this back because I'm looking at the bulk of the overall image. Now, the bird itself, I might like that brightness, and I'll show you what I do there in a minute. So I might bring this down to kind of darken that green a bit. I'll start playing with what this does. That begins to pull out this black and this white over here and this brown. I might do something with that later. I start looking at my white points. One of the things you can do is you can hit this upper, there's a triangle up here in the upper right. And what that does is that shows you where you're beginning. See how this starts to turn red right here? That means you're blowing out your whites. And so normally you're trying to find just below there. You can then do the same thing with the darks. Now this one might have a little bit of trouble with the darks. Yeah, here in the black, but that doesn't matter. I'm fine with having that. But you can start to see what darkening it does. That tells you that you're losing detail in those darks. So I'm usually somewhere in there. Shadows. So this would be kind of the shadow area under the wing. You can decide whether or not you want that to, you can see how that kind of creates some differences. I usually don't like to add texture, clarity, or dehaze here. That's very much a specific to kind of a like a brush sort of approach. I don't know if you guys have played with the new brushes or the new masking tools in Lightroom, but they have done a great job of doing the, you've still got your old brush, linear, radial gradient. You can do color range, luminance range, but these top two are new within the last 6 months or so. and they do a fairly good job. So I select subject, and you can see that it has basically selected the bird and the stick. And so now any adjustments I make here, and I can turn that red on and off with my O button by hitting the O on and off. So it's still selected, I just can't see it. And you can see that when I do that, it just affects what it considers to be the subject. I can darken it down. So you can have a lot of fun to play with these sorts of things, but it's really just affecting them. And so if I want to brighten the bird up a tad, maybe a little contrast in here. Now this is where I will start to add maybe some texture and clarity. See if I can pull this up. Give me a second. So you can kind of see how these affect. So especially right here in these feathers, probably. See how that starts to change that just a tad? Also use a dehaze, but you'll also notice that when you do that, it kind of darkens things a bit. And overall, this isn't a bad sort of, I mean, it was pretty good to begin with. I would probably be done with that mask. I'd probably go down here and remove some of the noise, not because it, it's a hateful thing, but you can see it's still kind of clear. But what I might do then is one of the things that I'll often do is I will paint just around the eye, and I will add a bit of sharpness and clarity to the eye. Sometimes even a bit of exposure, just to brighten it up just a tad. I don't want it to be seen too much. And so you can see here on the left, this long list of stuff that I've done. So here's where it started. Here's where it's at. And by doing that, I see that I might want to pull the lights back a bit. Maybe even go back over to my main thing and pull the whites back just a tad. Because it feels a little bright right through there. Maybe even pull the exposure back just a tad. And then I would, because I crop, it depends on what crop you're going for. You can do 1-to-1. And you start thinking through, okay, now how does this, lay itself out on the screen? That's an Instagram style of crop. The 4x5 is a good general place for most, because if you're going to frame it or think of framing it, and then it's just a matter of how you feel it needs to go. And that's a general basic edit on an image that is was pretty much straight out of camera, good to go. Even though I did a good bit to it to go from that to that and the crop. Any questions about this? Nope. All right. And so this one would be one that I would consider done. I like the action, I like the eye, and I would put this one out there. As a, yes.
This is Rodney. I got a question for you.
Yes.
I know you said it matters with where it's going. What would you have done differently if you were going to print that? What might you have done differently, just in general?
Well, if I'm going to print it, I'm going to print it, nothing. I would have done it just like that for that one.
So you wouldn't make it darker knowing that the monitor is brightening it from the rear, whatever that is, or?
So the difference for me is, this is a computer, I'm working off of a separate screen that you guys are seeing. And this is a BenQ photography monitor. So it's color processed, the brightness is set to be, you know, what it is. I also do mostly my own printing here at the house. So I would print it, and if I saw any issues, then I would make adjustments from there. You can make contact sheets, which is a great thing to do. So if you hit, let's say I hit these 6 on, I could hit print, and then they have a contact sheet. Yeah, so 4x5, 5x8. You can see that these become contact sheets over here, and it'll print this out like this on an 8.5x11, and then I can go through and get a general idea for, are those greens going to be what I want, without having to print the big ones and then go, oh, I got to throw this whole thing away.
Gotcha. That's a good suggestion. Yeah, that's a good one.
So it's like the old contact sheets you used to make in the dark room, where you would lay them all down, put the piece of glass on it, turn it on for a good general exposure, take it out and figure, oh, this one's darker. It needs to, this one needs to be that. If you haven't bought or don't have or checked out this book here, Magnum Contact Sheets, is a great resource for teaching yourself how the greats have gone through. And because they used to use film, same sort of thing, and you go through, and these are the contact sheets that they made with all their markings of, I don't know if you can see it by way of there, but there's little red markings from their pencils and stuff that they would go through and say, okay, I like this one. I want to cut this one here. This one needs darker here, lighter here. And so many of those famous photographs that you have in your mind that these guys did, you can go and you can see that, oh, they took contact sheets, then they marked them up, and they wanted to dodge, burn. That's the phrasing for it. Dodging means lighter here, darker here. So on this one, I dodged the eye, is what that would be called, because I specifically came in here and made that section lighter. But say I wanted to burn a section, so like over here, let's say this section, because it's a little lighter, there's this black, there's this down here, there's that kind of lightness there. And so what I can do is then I can start to burn that, and you can pull that down just a bit and it becomes less distracting. So if I were printing this to just sell or something like that, I might go through and I would probably then get rid of these really overt, kind of draw your attention away, black and light spots. That just, because what you want to do is you want to sit with an image for a while, and if anything in the image pulls your eye away from the action of the subject, then you probably need to either do something about that or take a better shot, go back and take a better shot. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So with this one, I would probably intensely do a little more intense editing of stuff, maybe like the cloning. So like I probably wouldn't want that, so I would move that so it's not the tail. And I probably wouldn't do it that big. I'm just doing a rough kind of thing. Over here, I've got the black, but I want it to be kind of on the green there. It's kind of giving me a weirdness. So you can see, I mean, obviously I would do a better job, but you begin to try to get rid of those things. And I know that some people, that's not their thing. They don't want to do that. They think that's wrong. I don't think that it's dishonest to the original scene, if that makes sense. There are others that are dishonest, and I'll show you a dishonest one. As a matter of fact, I did it. It was dishonest in that that particular thing never happened, but that the two together did. And I'll show you those now. Let me go here. Okay, so here's this series. I start with this bird. That's the female. She's coming in for a landing, and you can kind of see down here that the male was sitting on the top of the box. Its wing kind of comes up. She kind of lands, which now it's kind of like, he's flying over, which is kind of cool, but it's his back. There's a shadow across her. Now all of this, now it's still kind of bad. Don't like this. That's gotten better, because at least, you know, now here he's looking. You can either, and this is an artistic choice. You've got this one where he's looking at her, or that one where they're both looking at you. Depends on which one you feel is more impactful. Some would like this because it would keep the eyes. She's looking at us, he's looking at her. It would create this kind of loop visually. I'm going to keep looking. He kind of flies around. And I ended up, so what I did, if you saw my Instagram a couple of days ago, I liked his position here, and I liked her position here. So this is where you could see that they were both together, but they were never both together in the way that I'm going to turn this into. So here I like this position with him, and up here, this position with her. So I'm going to right click. I'm going to edit in, and I'm going to come down here to open as layers in Photoshop. I don't know why it's giving me that message nowadays. Let me bring this over so that I can, come on. Okay. So now I've got Photoshop open. You can see down here in the lower right that they're both layers. If I turn that off, there's the one with him. There's the one with her. Now, because I was set up on a tripod aimed, the stick is basically in the same spot. I could not have done, let me show you this one. Well, somebody could, but I'm not that good with combining like this image with, say, this image. Two different crops, two different ways. I'm sure somebody could. That person is not me. This one I can do. So what I do is, this is a more intense edit. I am going to select both of them. I'm going to go up, and I'm going to go to auto align layers. Now what that's going to do is it's going to find similarities between these two layers, and it's going to line them up over top of each other. Okay. So let me auto align. You get a dialog box like this. I usually do auto. That seems to work. Takes it a second to process it. Is it doing it? All right. All right. So now you can see, if you look right here, let me come here. If you look right here, you can see that there's a little bit of a gap. There's that checkered background there. And what that means is that they have slightly moved to get them. Now I'm going to switch them so that they are still aligned, but that's over. And then I'm just going to add a mask to this one. If you select the mask, the thing with Photoshop is if you paintbrush black on a mask, it hides it. If you paintbrush the white, it adds it back. So I'm going to choose my paintbrush, my brush tool. I'm going to look at my size. That's a decent size. I usually keep it so that it has some soft edges. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here and I'm just going to start to paint and remove. Now, the reason I'm going to be careful is because remember on the other one, on the one with her, that wing is coming up there. So I'm just going to take and come down to her tail. I'm going to watch for her feet. I'm going to make sure I paint over. Go over, make sure she's completely removed. And now you've got an image with a lot of action. And so when I save this, it'll start saving down here in the lower left. Now I can go back over here to the library and I have to look and see where it put it. Where did it put it? Oh, it doesn't put it back in the, give me a second. Because it doesn't have the same, where'd it go? Ah, here we go. So now we've got this image with the two combined action shots. And now I can go through and do any of the other editing that I want. I would probably, because this white space down here, so I'm going to crop it a bit. Probably over in Lightroom or Photoshop, I would get rid of this darken section here, dark and light. Or I would turn it to a portrait. That's a lot of cropping. I mean, I'm already doing a lot of work on it. And now you've got this kind of image. This one would definitely be rejected from a lot of shows, a lot of competitions, because for wildlife sections. But to be honest, a lot of shows, they don't even, they're not, they couldn't tell the difference. They wouldn't be able to know, but if you look closely, you can see that I would have a lot of work to clean up because here, this section right here didn't quite line up. So I've got this weird ghosting of a stick right here. This didn't, like last year we were going through the Middletown Arts Center, and in a category where they were supposed to do very little editing, there was somebody who had clearly edited in a huge amount of thing because most of I forget what it was. There was snow, but they had removed the snow because they combined two images, and the judges never caught it. And I mean, because most of the time people don't look that closely. Most of the time people are going to look at this and go, oh, this is amazing. Look at all that action. And they're not even going to read the fact that you said this is a composite image. And even while it's a composite image, I mean, depends on how you say. I mean, it's still true to the spirit of what was going on. These guys were fluttering around and moving, all that sort of stuff. So, and then she took off and then he hopped back up. So Any questions on this?
It was pretty cool.
How many of you guys are a get it right in camera? You feel pretty strongly about that?
I always shoot for that, but very seldom do I not need to edit.
Well, editing is different. So I don't put standard adjustment stuff. I would say that the first one, I would feel pretty much okay saying that that's pretty much what it was. The second one, no, that would be dishonest for me to say that I shot that like that. Tom, because I know you would probably have a thought on this. Difference from the first one to the second one? Or would you say that they were both too much?
No, I think it really depends on what you're doing with them. Like you said, I wouldn't have, the second one I like as an image. I think it's, and so to put it like, to print it and put it in a booth for an art show, I wouldn't hesitate to do that.
Yeah.
But you're right, I would never enter it in any sort of competition.
Right. Unless they said it was okay for that section, because I know that there are some elements of the competition. So here's where it usually gets me, is if it's a digitally edited image, this one, so if I entered this one, it would lose horribly because it doesn't look for the most, and after I would clean this stuff up, it doesn't look digitally altered. Even though you just watched the process, it was pretty heavily digitally altered. I combined two, I erased. There's more that could be done, but for the most part, this is pretty heavy imaging for a wildlife shot. But when people enter those digital manipulation ones, it's the ones where they're bending reality and inserting elephants into the middle of, playgrounds in the middle of Kansas, or, those sorts of things. Those are because they want, when they say digitally manipulated, they want to be able to know that it's been digitally manipulated, but not be badly combined. Where for me, I think that the best digital manipulations are the ones that you have no idea have been digitally manipulated. And on this, so let me pull this up and I will go to, when I got done with this, you can see that I corrected the limbs, I did that sort of stuff. And, so pretty heavy digital manipulation on this one.
There'd be a difference between if you called this art as opposed to a true photograph.
Because the challenge with that, and I think we've talked about this in Tom's gathering a couple of times, it's kind of like anything else in life. Where do you draw the line? Because the minute you snap the shutter, you've made artistic decisions about how you're going to frame it, either there or when you get back here. What's the difference of cropping it on site versus cropping it here? There are some people who bring artificial light and will light stuff up. Macro photographers will often have flashes and hoods and stuff. Where do you draw the line there within the field versus here? So it's all manipulated in some way. It's all a manipulated reality. I remember during COVID, there was I think it was one of the photo articles that was, they weren't trying to make a political statement, but they were showing how perspective changes an image. So it was the same line of people. And when you photographed them from the side, everybody was 6 feet apart. But when you went to the end of the line and you took these people that were like this and you turned them like this and you photographed it, now it looked like everybody was on top of each other. And they showed how a very similar thing had been done in 2 news articles. One had them from the side and was talking about how people were respecting distances and staying 6 foot apart. And another one taken at the same location was from the end and was talking about how nobody's listening. They're all stacking up on top of each other. And depending on your perspective from an in-camera shot, they had influenced how people thought and reacted.
Well, and I think it's a little bit of an issue of integrity
Mhm.
of the shot. Like, it would be dishonest to say that this was a shot, that
Right.
this was a single shot. But
Right.
I have no problem with you say, hey, this is a composite.
Right.
And so then it's like, I like the image. And so, but yeah, it would be, and I think, I've gotten in trouble because you shoot, like you said, with the things in a line and you shoot them with a telephoto lens and how that compresses distance, and it looks like you're right on top of something or people are right on top and you get in, and I've had to explain to people, well, no, this was with a,
Right.
a 600 with a 2X on it. And yeah, it's going to look that way. I
Right.
did it on purpose. I did it on purpose.
Yeah, you change perspectives with lenses, with all kinds of stuff that you affect in the field. My preference is I would love to have gotten this shot. As a matter of fact, so here's something similar, because this is another, I was going to show let's see. I was going to do a couple things. Is this the Yeah, so here's this. Is this the series? Oh, no. Oh, here it is. So this series of them landing. And so this was my test landing shot. She lands with the bug, which is amazing, but he's still fluttering around. So I'm taking her. This is a very frustrating series because I was just off center and I would almost have to reject every image in this. And it's that one I could probably use, but you can see that some of the better ones, like that one I could probably get away with. That one is really close. That one I wouldn't use just because these should be better. Now, what some people will do, and what you'll see in a lot of bird groups and stuff like that is, man, they will take this, they'll edit it, and they'll give you, this as their shot, and they'll get everybody going, those are amazing. And as a wildlife photographer, I go, no, that's crap. You should never cut off the wing like that. You should automatically reject this image and not show it, despite the fact that you wanted it to be good. This, maybe when I was first starting out, I would have probably went, this is great. I got it. It's, I could see his feathers for the most part, all of that stuff. But you shouldn't. This is a bad shot. Now this one I could get away with. There's enough space, but the problem is now, is how much you're cutting, and you get this weird sort of huge gap over here on the right. So
Obraham, this is one of those where you get into how far do you push it? And
which what?
with editing,
Uh-huh.
because like the one that you've got there, with very minimal amount of effort, you could use content aware, you could use stamping tool.
I was thinking the same thing.
Really
Yeah.
create that green and make
Well,
it.
and
on
that's
the
what I
other
was going to
side.
do next with this one, was going to show, because just as a tool. So this one I would edit in Adobe Photoshop again. You can see it brings that over. I'm going to come up here to edit, which is, where's it? No, image. Canvas size. You'll get this to pop up. I would push there because I want it to push this way. I don't know if the camera's picking up the right way. I want it to push to the left, over here behind him. And then I'm going to do, I don't know, let's do 4,500. It gives me that much space, which is decent. I will do this and select that. I'll come back up here to edit. I'll do content aware fill. Now it gives me a preview and that looks pretty decent. Just for a quick thing. And then I always go ahead and merge down and deselect. And now the question is, am I being dishonest? Am I pushing too far? Is this right or wrong? Now, in a strict Audubon, Nat Geo sort of way, yes, this would be a rejectable image because of what I've done to add in.
Right, you've added.
Some competitions would have you reject this, would automatically reject it. Like Tripod Photo Club, that in their nature center or their nature division of competition, this I couldn't use.
Right.
Now for me to edit and do this, I have no problem doing this. And I don't even believe that this is dishonest. But that's just me. Now, if somebody asks me, I'm not going to lie and say, this is exactly as I took it in camera. Because I'm more than willing to tell somebody, oh yeah, content aware fill, added a little on the side, just so I could get a better, so that when I come over here and I do, when I save it back, let's see, is it, it's like right down in, where was it? I think I have to go out of here. Yeah, there it is. So then I would go up here and I would, now I can crop it. And I can get a great crop. And you can't tell where that line is.
And I think it's with something like this, it comes down to just the issue of what the, you know, where it's going, I guess, right?
Right.
You wouldn't
What the
want,
competition
want-
rules are, and
yeah. what the
whether or
rules
not you,
are.
whether or not you're honest, if somebody asks you, the biggest and most infuriating thing that I see online is when somebody replaces something obvious, you know it's been done, and you're like, oh, is this a composite or did you replace this guy? No, I don't know how to use Photoshop. Well, that's obvious you don't know how to use Photoshop, because otherwise it'd be a better background.
There's such a shitty job, right?
Yeah. The question is do you have any integrity here? And the fact that you're denying it tells me you don't. I got kicked out of an owl group because one of the admins kept posting up owl pictures with the same background, the same sky background. And Jeremy also got kicked out of the group because he's a little more forthright with saying stuff. And he's like, how were you able to get the owl sharpen in focus and the clouds that far in the back sharpen in focus? And the guy told him, well, once you get good enough at photography, you'll be able to understand how that happens. And if you know anything about Jeremy, you know that he has forgotten more than that guy probably ever knew. It's just impossible to get sharp clouds that far away in the background and an owl that close and both being, you just can't do it unless you use a composite image or something. And then Jeremy decided to ask him why the same background was in like 4 or 5 of the images he posted on the thing. And, you know, and then we both got kicked out. So,
I don't want to
you know,
get on
it
it,
was,
but there is the,
it's
I'm sorry.
integrity. So,
and, you know, I know for the North American nature photographers, you know, they have a, I guess part of their guidelines are that, again, if like a composite, you should somehow note the image as being composite. Even
Right.
so, even though someone may not ask you, you would say, yeah, it was a composite, or you would, you know, put a small C in it, that not the copyright C, but you know, something else. And so you know, but on something like this, it's definitely, I think I would look at the rules, and if it said no adding or subtracting, then, you know, obviously you wouldn't be able to enter this as this.
right. And because I put in the work, so if I go back over to my library, and I think the reason why people are dishonest is because they're lazy in the field. And I can say that because I was that at times throughout photography and still am at times. You know, I've got 15 minutes to go out and shoot and I get this, and this is the best one and I can do this. And so I put this up and you feel like you need to defend and not feel like you were lazy. 1,500 shots and I was there for 2.5 hours shooting, making sure I got the shots. And because I put in the work, I was able, because like that one isn't bad, but like, you know, I go back to the first one I did. That was just a few shots in. And that is I think a portfolio worthy shot of a bluebird. Maybe not the greatest bluebird shot ever taken, but the feathers are there, the eyeball is there. And, you know, I would probably even take this out and run it through Topaz Sharpen or Denoise. Those two are amazing programs. But because I stayed and worked it, you could see that I got decent enough shots that I don't have to lie or be dishonest with other areas of shots, or be okay with subpar shots. Like this one, I would consider a subpar shot. Now it's kind of action oriented, but I don't like the way he's looking down. This is a personal thing, so this would be a personal choice. Good wing exposure, but he's still looking down. But we see shots like this on bird groups and other photography groups all the time because they didn't put in the work. They were lazy in the field, too lazy to get better shots with action shots. And I did that. I can't tell you how many birds on a stick shots I have.
And I'm gonna chime up here. I think I'm gonna ask you use different set of words here. To me, when you say somebody's lazy, you're implying they're lazy. They're not trying to do it. There's also there's an experience thing. Some of these shots here that you don't like, I'd be pumped up if I got that shot right now.
Right.
And I mean, work my butt off to get that shot. But then I come along 18 months later, and I've done that with some of my stuff. I look at it and say, oh my God, what was I thinking? And we've all done that.
Yes.
So I'm just
Yeah,
asking.
there is growth.
Different.
But I do think a lot of it is also lazy. They don't put in the time. They show up, they snap a couple of shots and they move on. And they don't put in the work to get that shot. And so they put up with, it's probably the best they've ever gotten, but not the best they could have gotten if they'd have put in the work. Because yes, if you're out there putting in multiple hours of work and your level of development is, you know, any number of these other ones that I would reject, then yes, but we're at different places. But I would also say that if you stood there, because I don't think I did anything all that amazing, standing there, I just put in 2 hours watching the birds, being on time, taking the shots, and too often they'll walk up and they'll go, oh, there's some birds, because I've seen it. You know, I put in a couple of hours trying to get down to the water line to take photos of the night heron in downtown Dayton. And I watched 15 to 20 other photographers walk up, snap shots. Half of them, the light wasn't even good yet. The other ones showed up and went, and then walked away. And I know they didn't put in the time. I'm sure Tom can tell you that if you're out if you go down to the elk rut, you get there at 4 a.m, it's still dark. You're trying to figure out where they are in this big field without getting you want to get out there so that you can get the shots when the light comes up. But then after you've been there for 6 hours, the light starts to get really bad. The elk are still there. But as you're leaving, there's like 30 people carrying big photography gear in to come take shots in the middle of the afternoon of these elk in the bright sun. And you're too late. You missed the great light. you know, you were lazy, you slept in or whatever. There's just a level that you kind of got to pick things up over time. And there's also inexperience. So you are bouncing a few things, but I think inexperience is also can be an excuse for laziness too. So yeah, I mean, there is growth. You got to watch it. And if somebody who has only picked up a camera 5 or 6 times turns in some of these things, that's not laziness, but it also still is, because you could have put in a little work. Let me show you how to put that work in, and then you can hang around, because there's a local guy who had only been shooting 6 months and was putting out incredible shots because he was waiting for stuff. He was putting in hours sitting there watching a bird, waiting for that bird to do something, and he wasn't leaving until the light was bad, or you know, it was just over. But too many people, I think, just walk up, fire off some shots, walk away. And because for most people, good enough is good enough. They're going to have all of their raving fans tell them they're the best photographer they've ever seen. You know, so. And you know, like I could say, I personally had gotten lazy too, putting out stuff that I should never have put out. And sometimes you just need to have somebody call you on it. And for me, that was Steve a bit, and also a few other people that I know. So it's kind of both. You just got to be careful and figure out where you are and which one fits you and which one doesn't. Kind of as an end, let me see. I wanted to do. So here's what I want to do. Because one of the main things I think that happens for a lot of people is shot selection. In a series of shots, choosing the best shot to start editing can often be a problem. And so here's what I wanted to do. I'm going to scroll through these. You can see these numbers right here up in the upper left: 6535, 36, 7. What I'd like to do is kind of end our time. I'm going to scroll through. There's how many are there? There's 26 images. I'm going to scroll through slowly. You look at the number, and when you see a number of the image that you would choose as your primary one, write it down or something. And then what we're going to do is we're going to talk about, I'm going to have you explain why you chose that image. Sound good? Everybody here?
Yep.
All right, here we go. If you need to see another one, I can go back. Everybody get your image?
Thank.
Can we do it again?
Yeah.
Okay. So here's the first one, and I'm going to start now. Okay. Everybody good? Who wants to tell me their first number and why?
Well, I think the name was, I can't remember. Look up 53.
This
Yeah.
one?
Yeah, I like that one because you got some flight, little action, but you got the one bird looking at the other bird.
Okay.
I'd probably crop that down a little bit to get rid of a lot of the.
Yeah, yeah,
noise.
yeah. This one be good.
Yeah.
I would even probably crop this just a tad because that light spot.
Mhm.
Find a way of getting that out of there.
There's almost like a little emotion associated with it, I guess.
Yeah.
maybe. So, you know. And she might even have something in her mouth.
Yeah, she does. She has an
Yeah.
Little-
insect.
So go to the next one. See
That one?
that was, yeah.
Again, you're looking at probably about the same crop.
Yep. And the only reason I like that one over the other one was I just like the blue of the wings rather than
Yeah.
just
Yeah. The wings.
underside of the wing.
Yeah.
That's the only,
Yep. No, I agree.
Yeah, I think both of these are, yeah. Someone else?
I had 65, 54 also.
So you had 54. And what
Yeah.
else?
Oh, I like 58 too.
But that one, no, that one. Yeah.
Got a facial on both of them.
Yeah. Still got that action on him. You got some blue and some a little bit lower. So you're looking at, you know, a deeper crop. But
Bottom one needs a little light on him, I guess.
yeah, well, so the thing is because he's bluer, she looks lighter. Because she's a paler, she's got that grayish and the lighter, where
Right.
because he is the male, he's far more colorful.
Yeah.
Birds are completely opposite of most. I think probably something a little more even, but anybody else? Michelle, Ryan, Rodney, Anne-Marie.
I picked 52 as one also.
So you chose that one.
That was one of the ones I chose. I chose 54 also, but I kind of liked that one. This one is not really sure
Yeah.
where he's going, but his mouth is open. I kind of like that. I liked a little bit of the difference in his wings.
Yeah.
And then I picked 60. And
Okay.
my eyes aren't the greatest. I'm trying to look at these light numbers. And those are just sitting there, but they're both just sitting perfectly and staring the same way.
Right.
And they're almost like symmetrical. If they
Yeah.
were humans, you'd be asking them to pose.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, if they were dogs, you'd say stay and have a treat.
Yeah.
And see, that's always the challenge. So here's the problem with social media, I think sometimes, is that we can post however many we want. And sometimes you know those how they say that sometimes the false constraints push you to creativity. I think sometimes we need to do that with our social media, in that we need to say, look, I can post as many pictures as I want, but I'm going to make myself only choose one or two. And what that forces you to do is in this scheme, here's how my processing would work. In this scheme of images, this isn't going to make the cut, because while it's a solid image of two birds, they are sitting there. Now she does have, something in her mouth, But when I start looking at impactfulness of image, we're going back to
Yeah.
these up here,
Mhm.
far more impactful. Even this one, it's very similar, but he's still coming in for a landing. So there's a bit of action. There's I wrote an article for my blog that talked about how when you're doing wildlife, you need the 4 F's: fighting, flying, feeding, and then I'll leave the last one to your imagination. Flirting, we could probably call it.
I saw some of that Sunday with some dragonflies.
That's right.
Very interesting.
It's because there's action, or if not, there's usually something that has to be very compelling about it. The look, the environment, because I know Tom is probably the only other, I mean, there's a few other wildlife photographers, but personally that I know, that because I was listening to a bit of your interview thing today, and I do it a lot. I do a lot of environmental shots of wildlife. I like the close-up stuff, but I like to see them in their environment. And so sometimes it can't be that close-up emotional thing. Let me see if I can do, I'll show you how. So let's see. I don't know. That's Photoshop. Let me get rid of that.
And I would just add, you have to be ruthless with your own editing
Yeah.
and your own, when you start calling photo, you have to be ruthless, because no one, especially like to your point about, social media, how much, you can post 100, as much as you want to. So,
Right.
but I
So-
think being ruthless with yourself,
So here is my main working catalog. I got 108,000 images in there. Rodney, you were asking about star ratings. So I do edited and I do stars, and these are ones that, but you can look and see how many of these birds just sitting. And these are decent shots of birds just sitting, but you start adding in action, and it changes the way you relate to that particular image. And there's some, like, that's a decent shot of just sitting. It's a good portrait. I've got, this is okay. It's a junky background. But back to the point that I was with Tom, you start taking environmental shots. So there's stuff like this where you keep getting stuff in the background. You get the ones in the front. I did far more of that. So like here's one of my shots of a grizzly bear. You still get those shots there, but you start putting them in context of something bigger than just crystal clear face shots and stuff like that. So, but any
David,
questions?
how many hours did we spend in Missouri sitting there waiting for the eagle to come and snatch that goose?
Well, you spent more than I did.
Oh yeah, I probably was there for 4 hours and
Yeah,
got nothing.
you got nothing off of that.
No.
And you could have either seen that as wasted or whatever, but it wasn't, because it could have happened. And then you would have had that shot and nobody else would have. But a good bit of it is also learning to read wildlife. Like, I knew that these guys were coming in to feed their young. So I just set up and waited. And you can see, let me go back to where am I at? There we are. I can show you some of the, how many of these other shots I took. And there are some that I could still like, that's not bad. That's a good one. But how many of these shots I've taken just to get, you know, and then wait for them to come back. And so, and you can see the difference here. This is a good advertisement for Topaz denoise. So you can see how much noise is in this one because the ISO was a bit higher, light was a bit lower, and yet I was able to use the denoise program. Very little noise, but overall, very little lack of it. It didn't take away the detail. But selecting out of these, and you know, somebody could have very much chosen this one as much as that one. Maybe they like that coming in, or maybe they like the launching off. Any of those work. Artistic decisions, and I could go back. That's why I don't delete a lot, is because I could go back and do something with this. I probably won't because I don't like this light thing here, but I could probably figure a way of doing that a little better. But
It's too bad it's not coming out of a tree, cavity in a tree.
yeah, unfortunately, those guys don't do cavities in trees for the most part around here. But yeah, you start looking for natural sorts of things. And there's a wide range of people who they will like different things. They'll like the fact that they're not in a natural environment because now they're thinking, oh, this is very much like what I see all the time. But you can see like here's a good example of, I don't know how many shots this is, of trying to get this song sparrow to capture him while he flies off. And basically it didn't happen because as soon as you look over, so you hear something else, you look over and all of a sudden he's gone. You have just fractions of seconds to try to get these guys flying or some sort of action. So, you know, solid shot of an indigo bunting, but not really all that interesting. Little more interesting, but now you got a junky background, you know, so you're constantly making choices about what to include and what not to include. And so I'm trying to think. I took a ton of indigo bunting shots, but I'm not sure that I mean, I kept one of those like that and one of those like that because it was on a different sort of setup, but I haven't really edited or wanted to edit most of those indigo bunting shots because they're not all that interesting. 2 hours out with a wren, and I got one shot that's worthwhile. You know, so being selective, putting in the work to hang out there and see what they do, stuff like that. It's compelling. It's, you know, it's why like when we look at portraits work of people, we don't necessarily always like them, other than the fact that it's people we like that's in them. The ones that are compelling are the ones where there's action or there's connection, or you begin to see that person's true personality come out. But it's like the old ones where it's like everybody sits there and looks to the left, and you got all these pictures with everybody looking to the left. Or it's the same arrangement and they're all in, you know, white t-shirts and blue jeans or something stupid like that. And it's like you want to see their personality and want to see movement and action, or I do anyways. I want them to be my family in those shots, but I also want to connect with it. So any other thoughts, questions?
Yeah.
All right. I was going to tell everybody I'm doing, I put it up on my Facebook page, doing a photography hike at Pearl's Fen. I'll put it on the Dayton Photography Group page too. But I'm doing a nature photography hike walk thing on is it the 14th or 15th, whatever that is. It's a Friday night, 15th. So not this Friday, but next Friday, week and a half. So if anybody's interested and want to come out, what's that?
Where is that?
Pearl's Fen is in Fairborn, Ohio. It's just east side of Dayton. You go to the Beaver Creek Wetlands to register there. I put a link on the event. And when I share it, you can see that and go there. And then I'll be doing one there. And then in August, I'll be doing one at Oaks Quarry. So anybody wants to come up and wander around or meet me there, we can get you registered and come and take part. So.
Cool beans, cool beans.
So, any other questions on this stuff?
No, I actually picked up a few things from you. I'll definitely say that.
Good.
Beautiful.
Kathy's still here, so I must not have been that bad.
Yeah, no, I'm happy I'm been able to hang here and be comfortable, so it's got my interest, so.
No, good.
I wish you're more of a Photoshop person, because I'm not a Lightroom person. But
Well, yeah, I'm not much of a Photoshop person. I know enough to get by with what I need to get by with, but I find it overkill. It's like bringing a bazooka to swat a gnat
well,
when most of what you're doing is photography.
I learned with Photoshop,
Yeah,
and when I get into Lightroom, I don't know where nothing's at. And I use it sometimes for the HDR because does a different job. It does a different approach than Photoshop. So sometimes it's better, or sometimes I like Photoshop.
right.
So I'll use it for that sometimes. But what I have found, and honestly, over time, and this kind of goes back to you hit upon earlier, is when I first was getting into photography, I would take pictures and I would come home and I'd spend hours in Photoshop. I mean, probably not exaggerating, trying to make this picture look good.
Yeah,
Now, literally one time I looked at this picture, it still wasn't look good. I said, I could have literally got out of my butt, got in my car, drove back up there that day, took the picture again, done it right,
yeah.
came back and had it edited faster than what I was trying to screw around with Photoshop to make
Yeah.
it look good.
Well,
So
and
what I actually, honestly, I find that over time is I don't spend, now sometimes my sunset type stuff,
mhm,
I'll spend more time because there's a lot more involved in those when you're trying to pull colors out and
right.
play around with some things there. The subtleties between the colors is different, And but a lot of times the other stuff, I think the practicality of it is I don't use that much more out of Photoshop than what you're doing out of Lightroom, because if I get to the point where I have to do more than that, the picture's not very good anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
So-
And it's one of those things that it sounds rude if it's said to you, and probably I shouldn't have said it when I said it, but sometimes if you want to improve that image, the best way to do that is just go take a good image in the first place. Instead of wrestling with a bad image and trying to turn it into something, and sometimes you come back later and you see in that image something else other than what you originally saw, and you're able to do something that way. But
Well, sometimes things are trade-offs too.
yeah,
Is that like the other night when I went out to Huffman Dam, was trying to get some, because right now I can basically get out of the car, take pictures, and that's all I can do. I can't really travel far.
right.
And so I have to keep my footprint down close. So that was a good place. I could get out of the car, take pictures of the sunset.
Right.
And I had this picture I wanted to take. Well, I like this view, but unfortunately I left my wider lens here at home and I couldn't get what I wanted. I tried. So when I got back home, it's like, okay, it just, it didn't work. I thought a lot of times they'll look a little bit better when you get home than they do when it's there.
Right.
But that's part of it sometimes too, is it's just, had I then solved one problem, I would have had another problem. So
Yeah.
that's the dilemma behind photography.
And two, just to go back to Kathy, your point earlier about the experience, it takes a long time to learn to see the light.
Mhm.
I mean, I think that's the biggest thing with a lot of,
Mm.
not good photos is that, people just haven't learned to see the light yet. And so they haven't quite, I think that's a big part of what I see with, when I judge and critique things. It's like they're just, it's either an experience gap that they just haven't, put the two together yet. But, I think that a lot of the best photography is that, a lot of times you'll see good light and you're looking for something to shoot. You're looking for the composition with given the light that you have. Which is a little bit, can be backwards. Then you find a nice scene that you're going to shoot and you shoot it in crappy light. Well, a lot of times it's waiting for the light to get, to really get the shot. So, I think, Eric, you probably do the same thing where you'll spend hours and hours scouting a location. And then you're like, well, I'm going to come back here when X time of the day or whatever morning it is to get this shot in the light, that when the light is going to be right. And 9 times out of 10, you still may not work out, but.
Right. Well, and the other big thing I see that with a lot of images is, what you're taking a picture of, but it doesn't come across in the picture as what you're taking a picture of. What is the subject, and making sure the subject stands out. And I think that sometimes that doesn't, there's just too much going on. I judged a thing down at this fair down south, and this one girl, quality picture, young girl, quality picture. I didn't know who it was or how their age is. So my thing was not biased for or against her, but it was the ferns, the trees, all the way up into the canopy. And when it came time, this place had me talk through why I graded things the way I did. It was one of those, this could turn out to be very good or very bad sort of situations, because they wanted me to walk around and every photo that I had judged explain while the people are there. I'm talking about their photos to them. And that one, her grandparents were there because they had photos in, she wasn't able to be there. And they're like, well, why is this? Because I said, at first, this would have been my first choice, but this one now became my first choice. So this one dropped to second. And they're like, well, why is that? And I'm like, I'm going to guess that that what caught her attention was the ferns. And she's like, oh yeah, she talked about how the ferns were beautiful. I'm like, but the ferns are this much of a picture with trees and canopy. And she needed to find a way to make that the subject. And it just wasn't. So what it turned into was just this stand-up image she was probably about 4 feet tall, snapping in with some ferns, some trees, and it just was just a blah wooded scene. And I think a lot of times we don't have the subject as clearly defined as we think we do, because we know what we were taking a picture of and we think we got it, but it takes somebody going, what the heck were you taking a picture of? And so even on grand scenes, and I think that's the challenge of like what Tom does, what I do when we go to the larger scenes is that even in that, so like I have an image, I think I just showed it, where the elk and the mountain is all behind it. You still have to find a way to make sure that that they know that elk is kind of the subject in the midst of this scenery, and not, oh, here's just a great shot. Oh, this little bitty elk that's down here. It somehow still has to pop that's the subject in the midst of all of this scenery.
Yeah, I think Ansel Adams said there's nothing worse than a clear photo of a fuzzy concept.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the light, I would agree with the light, and I would agree, and I would add in the fuzzy subject. Or even it's a great shot of just, we don't know what it is you're photographing, and you might tell us, well, it's right there, it's no, it's not obvious. If somebody walks away and they're not exactly clear on what the subject is, then you didn't do a good job of defining the subject. And maybe that's your point, but that's also the excuse of a lot of bad photographers too.
Can be, but there's plenty of times people, well, you'll see that they just don't get it.
Yeah.
And that happens. I mean, you just shrug, that's where you got to be your if you're tough enough on yourself and ruthless with your own editing and your own kind of, then you get to the point where well, they just didn't get the point,
Yeah.
Photograph, because, and sometimes it happens,
Yeah. Well, and I think it's also, there are times where you just have to realize, I really like this shot, but all in all, it's probably not a great shot.
Oh, yeah.
I've
Right.
had tons of those where I have to go, I like this. I like the fact that I got this in this moment. It was meaningful. I still remember the first time I got my first clear shot of a bird in flight. It is a stupid photo. It's a bad photo, but it's a clear in shot gull flying. And when you're first learning how to shoot birds in flight, that's incredible. I may have even I probably did put it up on my Instagram. I shouldn't have. And if it's there, I should probably go back and take it off. But it's one of those things where, yeah, there's growth. But I've also found that the minute somebody starts talking to me about one of my images, if I find myself getting defensive, I need to remind myself to just shut up and listen, because maybe there's some truth. Because when I was like a couple weeks ago, when Steve Mathis was talking about some of my images, and I found myself going, yes, but, and it's like, I need to shut up and just listen. And he was right in those instances with what he was saying, but I was trying to defend it and needed to back off on some things that, it's not horrible. I could go back and, and say it's an okay image, but.
Well, as hard as the photographer, right? We all have the emotional connection to that image.
Right.
It brings back the experience. And I think, like you said, you said earlier, you need to live with it for a while. So you do it. And it's good to walk away from it for a couple of weeks and then come back to it, look and see if it still has, that kind of emotional or that, is it still a compelling image after you haven't looked at it for 2 weeks? And if the answer is yes, then, if it's not, then you say, oh, what the hell did I see in this? Then,
Well, and you've got to treat it like somebody else's image.
Well, yeah, and that's separating yourself from the emotional aspect of it.
Right.
Again, we've all, I don't think anybody, right? If you don't have that kind of excitement, then you probably are doing something wrong to start with. Maybe you need to do something else, because who doesn't get excited about, like you said, your bird in flight or the first time you see a grizzly or whatever, we all get excited about that stuff.
I got 600 bad shots of my first grizzly. So, it's.
Well, I went down to the elk run with Tom. Was it 2 years ago or a year and a half ago? And I literally, out of how many days, there's really not, I think a couple of them I posted on Facebook because, just so I could say I took the trip. But there's none of them I would even contemplate printing out or entering a competition. Just I go back and look at them, it's like they're just not even close. But that's part of what I'm trying to learn to do is the same thing with birds. I struggle, movement like that, just something I don't haven't picked up yet. Spend more time on flowers and insects, so sunsets. So maybe someday I'll get that one figured out.
Well, it's a little after 9. Thanks for coming by.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, I'll look at probably putting together some other stuff in the future and doing something, but it's kind of came out of some stuff that's been working on me and for other things that I've seen other people struggle with. So thought I'd give it a try and show somebody a process from beginning to end. So.
Well, thanks for sharing it.
Thank you. Bye.
No problem. You guys have a good evening.
very
Take
much.
care.
You too.
I appreciate you putting it together.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Eric.
Bye.